Hello and welcome in, everyone. We are so excited that you joined us and our amazing partner, Insightly, this afternoon to learn about how your CRM helps your sales leaders stay sane. Over the next hour, we're going to go through 7 ways to achieve this. So be sure to ask questions, add your comments in the chat section. We will do our best to answer your questions live, but if we're not able to, someone will reach out to you after the webinar. So be on the lookout for that communication. And now to go ahead and get things started, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our incredible host, Mr. Chip House.
Gina, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody who's joining. That's part of the Rev Genius network. Super excited to have you today. We are talking about 7 ways a CRM helps your sales leader stay sane. And I am joined by a couple of incredible revenue leaders today. The first is Mallory Lee, who's VP of Operations at Nihilus. And then we also have Ping Del Giudice, who's an experienced revenue leader and also former VP of Revenue Operations at Leapsome. I'm Chip House. I'm CMO at Insightly, the modern CRM that teams love to use. And I've spent the vast majority of the past 25 years in CRM and marketing technology in B2B SaaS companies, leading marketing teams. And so, but I am just the host today. I'm going to lean in heavily on my guests. And so let me have each of the guests tell you a bit more about themselves. I'm going to have Mallory go first.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me today. So Mallory Lee, I work at Nihilus. We are an API platform. I live in Indiana. I grew up in marketing operations, and I actually was lucky enough to work with Chip at ExactTarget way back when. So a little bit of a reunion today. Excited to talk to you guys. And when people ask for my fun fact, I usually say I have 3 boys and no hobbies. So that's me.
The boys are your hobbies.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fun to see you again, Mallory. Excited to have you with us. And Ping.
Well, thank you so much, Chip. I am Ping, and I've been in RevOps before RevOps became a thing. I started as sales ops, built it from the ground up at 3 different startups. And then from there, different companies inherited amazing marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops. And then we formed RevOps in 2 scale-ups. I live in New York with my husband and 2 wonderful kiddos. And we're enjoying the last week of summer break before they head back to school next week. It's pretty late in New York. We don't start till after Labor Day. And now that Mallory said a fun fact, I feel like I should too. Fun fact for me, I have 40 cousins, first cousins.
Wow.
Spread throughout the world. It's a big family. Thank you to Rev Genius and Insightly for this chance to talk about, one of my favorite topics, keeping sane using CRM for sure.
Yeah, it's so great to have you both. And thank you all, by the way, for sharing your favorite beverages. Like I said, mine in the morning is coffee, and then sometimes in the evening it's a beer that helps me stay sane. But let's dive into the topic. So let's face it, in B2B sales, the role of a sales leader is both exhilarating and challenging. And juggling targets, managing teams, and making critical decisions can be demanding and overwhelming. And this is where the power of a well-implemented CRM comes into play. Over the next 45 to 50 minutes, we're going to explore how a CRM isn't just a tool, but a strategic ally that empowers sales leaders to maintain their sanity amidst the chaos, plus occasionally coffee and beer or whatever. And then we'll delve into 7 key strategies that transform a CRM into a force multiplier, enabling sales leaders to streamline processes, enhance decision-making, and elevate the entire sales ecosystem. And who knows, with these 2 guests, we may end up with more than 7. And if we do, then that's what we'll go with. So, but the first on our list we have is making your CRM the single source of truth. And this is especially true when your company has, say, more than 5 people and you have multiple teams that need to engage with the data inside of the CRM. And the first thing that comes to mind is the old adage, if it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. And Mallory, I think I've heard you say this. So I'm going to send it to you first, and tell me more about this and why this is appropriate.
Yeah. Well, I think we all have heard that phrase, and I've used it many times. If it's not in there, if I can't see it and report on it, then it's not real. Come back later. This comes in handy quite a bit when people are looking to get paid for closing deals. So I would say that's when it's the most powerful part of the toolkit for revenue operations or finance or sales leadership. But over the course of the last, call it 5 years that I've been digging in more on the revenue side, I have seen that there are some things that happen outside of the CRM, and they exist for a while before they make it in there. And so I've seen, the reasons why, and every once in a while, I feel some sympathy for the people that are keeping things out of the system. But really, it's just taught me that you have to use that data for good. You never want someone to feel scared that when they put their data into the system, it will somehow create this extra layer of, fear or responsibility or accountability. You want them to be encouraged to go ahead and put everything in there so that you have the insights.
I think there are some people that are better at this than others. Some are used to maybe Post-it notes or something, and they figure they're going to get around to it. But I think that can be, a problem. So I think the challenge is, if you're a leader in an organization, how do you help enforce this? And how do you walk the walk? Ping, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate a good, handwritten notes. I like to do that myself. I think, when the sales leaders are doing one-on-ones or forecast calls and team meetings, to pull up the CRM, some dashboard that actually pulls the data directly from what's in the CRM. If it's not in there, the sales manager asks a question and the rep says, this happened. Well, did it really happen, or did it not happen? To what should both you and Mallory said, right? If it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. Right? It didn't happen. Put it in.
Yeah, I think that's how people approach a CRM, right? You assume that the data is in there about a customer if it did happen. And so, one of the things that's been talked about is managers can kind of reinforce this by using the CRM in one-on-ones, right? When they're talking to an individual sales or go-to-market person. Mallory, do you have experience with that? Can you tell me your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I've definitely had dashboards or reports in the past that, surface the activity of a sales rep, their open opportunities, what their pipeline is looking like. Really having the ability to use a report to guide the conversation is a great way to make sure that reps are looking at the right metrics. There is one source of truth, and oftentimes leaderboards help with this too. So if you guys are working toward any kind of spiff or, group activity, creating reports that everyone can see for a leaderboard for that contest is an excellent way to make sure everyone's looking at the same thing. And if for some reason their activity is not being logged, or if for some reason not all of their contacts are in the system, they're going to start to fall behind on that leaderboard, and the competitiveness of salespeople, will eventually catch up to them, and they will, start putting things in there because they want to win. So that's one trick that I've looked at in the past. And certainly the closer you can get to having your source of truth for things like commissions in the CRM, that is also beneficial because they will continue to go back to that data set to understand if they're going to hit their quota.
Yeah, if you can gamify it and appeal to that sort of sensibility that a lot of salespeople have, I think you're right on, Mallory. Sorry, go ahead, Ping.
Oh, no worries, Chip. And I just wanted to add on to that as well. CRM, some people think that it's a sales tool, salespeople use it. But then if you gives that access to the greater company, right? Marketing needs it, even products, definitely leadership, the dashboards that Mallory mentioned earlier, the more people sees it, and the competitive in the sales reps, hey, I actually closed this deal. Whoops, but I didn't update it to close one. I need to do that so it can show up in my dashboard that I'm not actually, 5th out of 6 or whatever it might be. that dashboard and the visibility, it helps encourage reps to enter information as real time into CRM.
Yeah, and I think it goes for other departments too that engage with the CRM beyond sales, like whether it's CS or the help desk or marketing for that matter, right? And I think to summarize, maybe leaders can walk the walk a bit, gamify it, and leverage that data as they're having one-on-ones with their team. So I want to move on to the second point that we wanted to talk about today, and that's about data hygiene practices. And nothing is going to drive a sales leader crazy more than having a dirty CRM. And I certainly, in my history, remember days where we just gather together. Okay, everybody clean up the CRM today, and you kind of just say, okay, it's data cleanup day. But keeping your data clean with data hygiene practices is clearly a way to help keep your sales leader sane. And how do you go about driving those consistent behaviors to keep the CRM data clean, Mallory? What are your thoughts?
I approach this in two different ways. The first thing, I was not the person who implemented this at Nihilus, but I have seen so many things that our team does. They have reports and dashboards that are specifically just for data hygiene. So if something doesn't match the right criteria, or if there's a field that's empty, or if there is something that's not formatted correctly, it will just surface itself in a report as something that needs fixed. And we've extended this to the way that we use marketing automation and some other tools as well. We just have these audit reports that help us see things that don't look quite right. So that's one aspect that I've really loved, seeing the way that Nihilus does this, because they're very proactive, and that makes my job a lot easier. The other thing that I've noticed over time is that often when you're introducing a whole new way of selling or a whole new way of doing something, and you want to start gathering data, I think the first inclination is to create this, standardized pick list right out of the gate, and you give them only 4 choices. And I've actually seen this work against me in the past, because if something is brand new, you might not really be picking the correct 4 choices. And so what I have eventually come around to doing is, and I wait for, let's say, a quarter, and I wait and see what kind of data we get into that field, so that I can then analyze it and figure out what are the common answers that should become our choices. And then this also has a little impact where people start to get sick of it looking messy, and they are the ones coming to you and they're saying, hey, can we standardize this? And you're like, yep, we can do that for you. And you kind of, it's like an inception situation where, you're waiting to see what the relevant info is before you start restricting. But by the time you do that, they're happy to have it simplified.
Yeah, and that I love how you said, getting the feedback. I think deals change or sales cycle could change. What's required the sales rep to do in order to hit the next step could change. As we get feedback from the actual users themselves, they know that we are listening and not just creating fields and the type of fields that we operators want to use to pull reports. I think that's key. That can sometimes be overlooked. And definitely garbage in, garbage out. You could have beautiful reports and dashboards if the data isn't clean, isn't correct. The reports itself isn't all that helpful. And I think it's also important, tying on to what we touched on in the first point, like driving that consistent behavior for reps to know what they need to do to have the discipline to keep that data clean. I think it's so important. The dashboard, it's not just the clean your room dashboards for the operators, for the sales leaders. Give it to the reps themselves. If a close state is in the past, it shows up on the dashboard. They know to then go in and change it. I've also tried instances where if they receive an email, a notification, it's a daily report or weekly report. I found those not as powerful, because you tend to get a lot of those reports and then you just ignore them 3 months down the road.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I love those kind of tips, because if, for example, you come up with a pick list, salespeople are busy and they're going to take the path of least resistance. So they're going to select whatever's there, right? They're going to pick one of the 4 that you came up with, Mallory, and you're going to end up with, as you put, garbage in, garbage out, right? You're not going to get exactly what you need to know unless you kind of provide that period. That's a super great tip. I love that. Somebody made the point, I think it was Lydia that made the point that we should, if we help sales understand that this is customer relationship management, I think honestly, sometimes thinking of it that way, and disregarding the acronym is actually kind of helpful, because it sort of puts forward the point of like why it needs to be clean.
Yeah. There's also validation rules that can and should be used, although not too crazily, where you need to enter a certain type of information, or if you hit a certain stage, you need XYZ fields to be completed. And it's also important to have the right prompts. If something isn't done according to the validation rule, make sure that the message that pops up tells them exactly what they need to do, rather than, I can't save this opportunity because I don't know what I've done wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. I noticed in the chat that Beck was asking, what's an example of where you use these empty fields? And I think that I could tie this back to Lydia's comment as well, because if you think about what the CRM is for, it is a way to remember everything possible about your customer. If you know that your customer has 3 boys and their names are this, that, and the other thing, and you can type that in, then when you get on the phone with that customer, you can say, oh, how are your boys doing? And it's a way for you to, call to mind your meetings and your emails and remember what's going on and really know the customer. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because in sales and new business, everything we do is really geared toward handing this great set of information off to customer success once that company joins as customer. So if sales reps get in the mindset of, okay, I'm gathering all this information during the sales process so they can have a successful implementation, then that kind of guides the way that you think about getting the data in the first place. And the example that we recently went through with Nihilus is that we started implementing Medic as a sales philosophy that allowed us to do better discovery with our new business opportunities. And so we were creating all of these fields for the metrics and the paper process and the decision makers and, what things are important to them in the deal. And so instead of getting these rigid lists of metrics for the reps to choose from, we went ahead and made that open text. So they could type in, here is the metric that our customer is looking to evaluate to see if Nihilus has had a positive impact on their business. So Medic, I can't remember exactly what it stands for. It's like metrics and then the executive sponsor, decision maker, paper process. There's like all these acronyms. I can send you guys a link for it. But we didn't have, this big set of well-defined metrics yet. And so if I had just created a rigid list, people were probably not sure and they would just pick one, like Chip is saying. And the worst thing that you can see in a report is that everyone is just choosing the first choice in the menu. And I think that's happened to all of us. It's like, okay, everyone's just picking the very first thing. And then you stop trusting the data anyway.
Or they pick other.
Yeah, they pick other, which is not helpful, right? So, when you have the validation rules in there, they're going to help you standardize the data formats, what fields are required and which ones aren't. And honestly, I think a bit of it is, the salesperson themselves is sort of trying to optimize the platform for themselves. And that's how they think about it. And I think it's the sales leader's role to tell them, here's how we use all of this data in aggregate, right? And that's why there has to be some standardization around the reporting. Remember these dashboards? That's how these get populated, right? With some commonality to the responses. So that's a great topic. Thank you for your feedback on that. So this is kind of related. The third one here, just to ensure that you are enforcing those definitions. So once you have a set of, business processes and definitions as a company, how well are you training your team and enforcing those definitions inside the CRM? And those can kind of manifest themselves in a couple of different ways, for KPIs, for example, Mallory. So MQLs, SQLs, what constitutes an opportunity in your org? Is it BANT? Is it something else? How have you seen the CRM help salespeople and sales leaders kind of reinforce those KPIs and make sure that they're common?
Yeah, if I could start with a little story that I had.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, the company that I joined, and when I started looking at the opportunities, I started seeing hundreds and hundreds of SS0 opportunities that were outdated, last updated maybe 12 months ago. And I was like, what are these opportunities? And I learned that these were opportunities that weren't actually, I mean, I know we're going to talk about the definition of what constitutes an opportunity, not a qualified opportunity. It was, hey, if you think somebody fits the ICP, go ahead and create one. Or for CS, for example, if the customer mentioned, hey, we may have a need in the future, go ahead and create one. But then nobody was looking at these opportunities. So they just ended up plugging the CRM, plugging the pipeline. So definitely so important to enforce the definition. What is SS0 if SS0 is a state in the opportunity? Totally fine that if it's not, 2 out of the 3 bands that constitute an opportunity, if you want to create a stage before a qualified opportunity, so that it's easier for tracking, easier for creating certain conversion reporting, no issue at all. Just make sure that you have the definition, the reps understand what they mean, and bringing back to the key to reviewing the information, because if nobody's looking at it, the reps will slowly go, I'll just put it in. Nobody looks at it. I don't care.
Yeah, they think that they're going to pass under the radar, right? And you have to prove that they're not going to.
Right.
I totally agree with that, Ping. I think that is a super common scenario. And I've been in several different companies where we might rewrite the opportunity definitions literally once a year because it's so fluid and the way that you sell can change. So that is hard to stay on top of. And, whether it's a qualified lead or a new opportunity or anything like that, one thing that I like doing is kind of making the data capture process almost like these little interview questions. Mm-hmm. So if I create a new opportunity and the question says, what is the CRM this customer uses? What is the marketing automation platform they use? If you don't know that information and you can't fill it in, then maybe you don't really have a qualified opportunity. And so getting the right data required at the right time comes back again to some of that business validation. And it's almost coaching you on the page. I know we're going to eventually talk about page layouts, but I'm a big believer in having the page coach the person on what they're supposed to be doing at that point in time.
And so how might it do that, Mallory?
So when we introduced, Medic and some different sales philosophies, at that time, we also worked around our sales stages and we changed them a little bit. And what we found at Nihilus is that our technical evaluation is one of the most important pieces of our sales process. And our customers don't buy without doing a technical POC. So that used to happen at several different times throughout the sales cycle. It wasn't very easy to understand if it was completed or not. And so what we did instead is we broke that out and made it its own stage. And so when we look at the screen, the page is organized by stage, and it will say stage 1, here's all the data that we need from you. Please fill all of this in. Stage 2, here's the data we need from you. Fill all of this in. And you can't move on to the next stage if you don't have, some data filled out for that. Or if you find that you're stuck somewhere and you don't have the data that you need, you might actually need to move backwards and do more discovery. So, by putting people in the by just asking the right question at the right time with your page layout and the way that you design the data collection process, the hope is that they get into the rhythm of understanding, okay, I've reached the point in my sales cycle where it's time for the technical POC. Here's what I need to ask them to get them ready to go do this. And then here's where I can record if it's been successful or not. And we're just kind of showing them the right data at the right time, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Mallory, because I think pipeline stages and things like probability of close is, relied on heavily, I think, by leaders in an organization. And, there's the only way to get value out of it is if there's consistency in what's getting put in, whether it's, I think every organization is different, right? But it's like there's always like a prospecting stage, some sort of qualification stage, a proposal stage, maybe a negotiation stage, and they're all assigned different probabilities. And so it's a function of training and the CRM, and you have to make the CRM work for you in some way.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to be extremely clear about what are the entry criteria to go into a specific stage. When you're in that stage, what are the activities that should be done? Maybe by different roles. It could be AE, it could be even marketing at the time, or SDR or channel partner if they're involved. And then once these things are completed, what are the exit criteria before you can go into the next stage? Like definitely I've also updated stages in my life in different companies. One thing that I found was, Chip, you mentioned the word negotiation. At a company, we had a stage called negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
And in one-on-ones, and well, I wasn't in the one-on-ones, but in forecast calls, hearing the reps thinking, oh, the stage is called negotiation, I should negotiate. Like, not really. If they're happy with the proposal, you don't really have to negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
We did end up changing the name of the stage.
Oh, interesting.
That's
a great example, because I think that leads us into our next point, Ping. Thank you for saying that specific example, because every business is different, right? And the benefit of a good CRM is it's flexible and you can customize it to support your unique business. And that might be one thing, that's a pretty basic thing. You just like naming the stages that match your business and how things really work. But I mean, what other things come to mind, Ping, whether it's page layouts for your business or something else for customization?
Yeah, I have actually used other technology that actually sits on top of Salesforce and or other CRM. And the CRMs can be good where you think you need certain information, you try to capture it, and the page can get cluttered so easily. With the other tools that sits on top of Salesforce, the CRM, you are then picking and choosing which field to surface to the reps that they can make changes and updates on the fly as they're going through their opportunities. Anything to simplify their workflow so they don't have to go through a whole page of where is the field I need to update? Oh, wait, they moved it. Where is it now? Here's a pop-up error. I can't save this. And the page layout can and should change depending on your ICP or the sales process, I should say. If you're selling to SMB, for example, the process itself is likely quite different from selling into mid-market and enterprise. Again, making the sales reps' lives easy. So entering information doesn't take 2 hours of their life. That's not selling.
Yeah, you're trying to make it seamless, right? So their time is optimized. Mallory, do you have other examples of that?
Yeah, I think some easy wins that people can look for are ways to put, the key facts at the top of the page. So if you're in a hurry, let's say you're in the middle of a board meeting and you get the question about a certain customer, you have to race in there and look up their account. If you can see the things that are most important right away, right at the top of that screen, that's a great way to give people just those quick pieces of information. So when is their renewal? What's their health look like? What is their, ARR with your company? Something along that line. Find the easy way to put the most key information at the top. And then, just limiting what you do have on the page. sometimes over time we collect just tons of fields that are not used anymore, but we are afraid to take them out of sight because we're not sure what's going to happen. And what I love to do is just take them away and see who yells at you. If no one cares and no one says a word, then clearly they're not worried about that data. And if they're not worried about it and if they're not using it, it's not useful to you anyway. So I don't go and just delete a bunch of things, but I'm very happy to take them off the page to declutter it and just kind of wait and see, does anyone even care about this thing? And sometimes they do, which is great, and sometimes they don't.
I love that. It's still there. You're just not showing it in the visible interface, right? And so
Yeah.
I think nothing will drive a sales leader crazier probably than scrolling past all sorts of empty fields, right? Or things that are no longer relevant. And so CRM is not a set it and forget it task. It's like truly, what's the state of your business to now, and how do I optimize that interface to serve those needs? I don't know. Are there other thoughts on customization that comes to mind, that best practices that either of you have used?
I mean, if there's automation that can be done, right? If a specific field, I can't think of a specific example now. Sorry.
I know what you mean though, Ping. It's like, if you can find two things that are always true together, then like make them linked and find a way to fill things out on someone's behalf. I think that's really good. I also love the point you made about very simple language changes that can actually be a mindset shift for people who are in the CRM. So that's a takeaway for me. Like, that's a really good way to make sure that you are using words that you want your team to use, and, you know, kind of adopting that mindset as they get into their conversations.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think, oh, by the way, yeah, Gina is mentioning that she had launched a poll. And so hopefully if you saw the poll pop up, please take the poll. We'd love to get your feedback on it. I can't actually see it myself at this point as a speaker, but please answer the poll if you would. Okay. So I'm going to move forward here to our fifth point. So, you know, one of the things that causes strife in CRM is if you have, anyway, garbage data going in potentially by people who don't belong in there, or people with maybe not the right level of permissions that are changing fields. So how do you go about keeping it simple and safe and limiting data access? And how do you think through the permissions for your company, Mallory?
I will admit, I think this often comes a lot later in the life cycle of a business. So I do remember specifically back at Exact Target, Chip, you might remember this. We had filed our IPO and we were entering into the quiet phase. We were doing all this like Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. And all of a sudden it mattered a lot who could see what. And we actually maintained a list of people who had like the burden of being able to see everything about the numbers in the CRM. So anybody who could see every single thing was on this documented list that went to like the government. So you were listed as someone who knew too much, basically. You know, thinking about it now, if I want to be part of a company that is scaling up and getting ready to grow a lot, and we have those ambitions of going public, it would be great to clean those types of things up early. You know, start out with that framework where only certain people can see the things that they need to see. You know, it's very easy when you're growing fast and you're a startup and you're not that worried about it to just give everybody everything and wait and see what happens. But I do think this is one area where working ahead and getting some of that, like that access control in place early on will benefit you later. It'll be a smaller job later.
Yeah.
Would you?
Sorry, Chip.
No, I was just going to say, well, maybe I can ask this question to you, Ping. I mean, would you recommend you start like with fewer permissions, fewer people in there with rights, and then expand as needed?
I mean, I know it's difficult when a company is relatively young because you don't really know yet. And probably trying not to spend too much time on the infrastructure from the get-go, and you want almost everybody to have access to everything. However, if you're selling into especially certain federal government divisions, the information can be so sensitive that you cannot afford to have multiple people without clearance to have access to the information. There was one company I was at where I actually own a spreadsheet. It was on a spreadsheet, Excel sheet, not even on a Google sheet, because that could easily be shared. It was stored on my laptop, making me a little bit nervous because only I had access to it. Basically had the actual name of the government agency with the fake name that I would create just to pop into the CRM.
Mm-hmm.
However, one thing I realized was that's not exactly foolproof, because we also had tools that captured emails. Like if you capture emails, you can see who you're talking with. So things like that you may not realize. So I really like what Mallory suggested earlier. If you know you're going to go down that path, do what you can to limit the data access, mission sets. So not everybody can see what they shouldn't be seeing.
Yeah, and I think a piece of that might be even the UI. Once the permissions are there, to your point, you're not going to show them things that are irrelevant to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting too. You mentioned when we were going public, Mallory, but it's like even beyond Sarbanes-Oxley, right? I think there isn't a company out there that I'm aware of that's not concerned about security, and I think it's now a big piece of all of our lives. And, so I know that SOC 2 is something that we take very seriously every year because security is just so important to us and our customers.
Yeah.
So let's move on. A big piece of getting value out of your CRM is using your CRM. And, your sales team, your go-to-market team won't use it if it's hard to use, but also if they feel like, hey, you're just wasting my time, So, automations was talked about before. So how do you think about using workflow automations or notifications, Mallory, effectively to help eliminate time-sucking tasks?
I'm a big fan of pre-filling anything that I can. So for example, if you are clicking a button and creating maybe an opportunity, whatever data you can pre-fill in from the account level to surface it on the opportunity, but make it very clear without them having to go type things in multiple times, that's great. Things like order forms and quotes and ways that you're starting to create paperwork. Anytime you can automate the flow of data onto that paperwork, I think is really valuable. Not only is it easier for everyone, but you reduce the risk of people just typing it in wrong or, misspelling something, whatever. And I do think that sales reps and CSMs and everyone using the system, they appreciate the assistance of automation way more than what we realize. And I've actually seen so many times where people say thank you for something really small, like, wow, thank you for automating this. It makes my life way easier. And it's something that seems really little to you and your team who are in there executing it, but it makes a big difference in their day. Just in, allowing them to go faster, sell more, be more efficient, get more done. So I think any time that you can make that happen for people, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, for any time they're not spending updating a CRM, they are focusing on the providing great customer service or customer experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And any, I know we talked about it earlier as well, like any automation for sure. And I'm a big fan of certain tools where it just takes the put in fields, just put it front and center to the sales reps. They know exactly what they have to do to make those changes, and keep the fields as many pick lists as possible where possible. Having said that, there is one field that I have always loved and will continue to love as long as I'm in this industry. I think it's not just next step, but mutually agreed upon next step. It's a field where we have to keep it open text, where it's not what you think will happen as next step, but what you have mutually agreed upon with the prospect or with the customer. Both of you said, yes, we agree, these are the next steps.
That's a good point. So do you do both then? Do you have a next step and the mutual one, or do you just do the mutual one?
Yeah, the very first time I did that, I actually built a custom field to then learn with other tools. The custom field made it a little tricky to do the integration. So next company, I just kept with the next step, but made it really clear it's actually mutually agreed upon next step. And put a date so it's a running history, so to speak. So you can go back and see what happened before. Did you last talk with them 2 months ago? That was a long time ago. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
So would you summarize, especially if it's important to RevOps and to leaders, if there's something you could automate it. And so that might be data entry, emails, could be task assignments, could be something else. I mean, is there anything else that comes to mind that I didn't mention already?
I'm a big fan of trying to find ways to automate the creation of contacts. So a lot of times that will depend on what your integrated tools are and kind of what your own tech stack looks like. But if you have a separate CS tool, like a separate support tool, and if you can find a way to go ahead and create the contact for the person who created that ticket and just put it into the CRM as easily as possible or even automatically, I think that's a huge time saver. Because one thing that I come across the most is just not having the right people in there. Mm-hmm. And you're sending an invoice, but who are you sending it to? Like, who's the person that needs to be the main contact? You might have a email thread with them that's like 85 emails long, but they're not even in the CRM. And so you're missing out on the ability to like see that engagement, score that engagement, market to that person, get them involved in like company events. If they're a mystery person, no one even knows that they exist. It kind of goes back to, the first thing we talked about is if you want support for this customer that you're talking to, put them in the CRM, and anything I can do to help get those contacts created automatically, I think is a big win for people.
Yeah, if it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. We talked about that at the beginning. Did you really talk to this person for the last 2 months or 20 emails?
Again, yeah, I think that's a huge, awesome tip, Mallory. So, we're going to move on to point number 7 here, but, as a CMO, I mean, a lot of the time I spend in our CRM is not entering data. I spend a lot more time in dashboards and reports and things like that. And that's how I consume a lot of CRM information. And so making your real-time data and at-a-glance reporting strong is a great way to make your sales leaders stay sane. And so, I think the opposite of that would be having a bunch of junk reports or dashboards that are outdated, that type of thing. So, I mean, the first thing, I'm going to go to Ping here. So how do you go about building dashboards that mean something to your business?
Yeah, I love dashboards. I love real-time dashboards. It makes the last day of the quarter so much more exciting. I have always had a dashboard that is the current quarter status. The top one is always when you're at quarter to date, and broken up however the company wants to see things. And then the rest of it, for the most part, it's kind of going backwards, right? You have these are the revenue numbers, the target numbers. These are your key opportunities or opportunities that are at the much later stage that you have forecasted will close this quarter, and then going down all the way through to like MQL for marketing for sure. It's like a one good snapshot, I think, of here are your targets, here's where you are at. You might be looking good for this quarter, but it's also always time to look at next quarter. Do you have enough to support next quarter's target, and so on and so forth. And I see the dashboards as actually not a static dashboard. It's used by people. They give you feedback. You make changes as things happen, as things change. But I love how you mentioned the real-time data. It's key to me.
Yeah, I think it's sort of expected in this day and age, right? Is that things are kind of up to date.
You'd be surprised to hear that some people don't have real-time data. It's 24-hour delay. I'm like, no.
Not good enough.
Delay, no.
The second a deal closes, you want to know right away. You want everybody to know, right? Yeah. So, well, I mean, how about the types of reports that you find work best for sales leaders, Mallory?
It's so hard to get this right. I think the reason that I still have a job is because this is like never perfect and never done. You know, for myself, I just try to make sure we've got the right information, but I also try to think about the timing that it's getting delivered. And some people I think would refer to this as like, you know, your cadences, like your RevOps cadence, your forecasting cadence. If you guys are paying a lot of attention to your forecast on Mondays, email out that report on Monday morning so that everyone has it in their inbox. They're kind of reminded of it. They see it before the meeting. You know, you've got the right thing at the right time. That is something that I think is easy to, it's like a quick win. You know, if you can get it to people at the right time, that's a big benefit. And it's easy to do. I've also had experiences in the past where, you know, maybe my CRO wanted to visualize something in a certain way. And it's totally different than the way that I would visualize it. And so you can either do it their way, or you can try to get them to see your way, or you can try to land somewhere in the middle. But at the end of the day, I think people do need to be able to see data in the format that they're comfortable with. It's like what they're used to, what they need, the way their brain works. And so I've seen too many RevOps people who kind of want to stand firm and say, no, you're looking at it wrong. Like, look at it my way. And sometimes that's a losing battle. So the way it's presented and how often you see certain things, I think is a little bit more important than what people can give it credit for sometimes.
And I think in one-on-ones or in forecast call, make it clear to the reps or the sales leaders what the CEO or the CFO or, you know, RevOps, what we are looking for. If it's the sales manager doing a one-on-one with their rep, if they're looking at a specific dashboard that has everybody on their team, maybe build a filter so that the AEs themselves can just filter to their own deals, their own information, and they can have I think, more productive one-on-one that way, instead of trying to second guess, oh, my manager cares about this, where do I find that? And the filter is nice where if you have the permission set already set up, you know, the different levels of folks can see different information, hopefully exactly to what they need and want to see, because not everybody necessarily cares about the same thing. And also reports that looks forward. I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Like too often people are focusing on current quarter, but then building opportunities, that pipeline takes time, right? You need to be planning ahead. And if you need to pivot, the more time that you have, the better the chance of success will be.
Yeah. I think oftentimes you're managing against answering the question of, are we going to hit the number this quarter? And that is very well suited for, you know, a moment in time. Like, here's what we've done so far this quarter. Here's the goal. Here's our progress to that goal. But that often actually is lacking the context that people would like to see of, you know, is that trending up or is that trending down? And does it fall off a cliff in 1 month from now? To your point, like being able to see past and future sometimes is really valuable for pipeline or for like the opportunity creation flow or demand gen. Certain things, you know, you can only look backwards up until today, but having that context of how it has changed, I think is a really good way to show people not just where you are, but, you know, how you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. And pipeline specifically, that rolling pipeline, it's so helpful to have. Yeah.
No question. And I think to me, the best reports are reports that I can use with my sales leader also. Like we have like one set of shared reports. Doesn't mean I'm not going to have my own marketing reports or he's going to have his own sales reports, but and a lot of those we'll look and share at in meetings when we get together. But having a shared dashboard is often really, really helpful to have the single source of truth. By the way, I just saw that Gina chatted in, and we provided a resource here, which is an ebook that we'd done last year based on some research, which is how to choose the right CRM to align teams. And it's really fascinating data because we had, I think, 500 different professionals across sales, marketing, ops, and service fill out this survey. And we found that the companies that were growing the fastest were also providing the best customer experience and were the most aligned. They judged themselves to be most aligned. And I think it's your CRM that brings you together around customer data. And that's why I think that research is so fascinating. So you can click that little thing that looks like a document, and you can pick up a copy of that PDF. We'd be happy to show that to you. And Gina, how can you pop on and tell us how to see the poll results? Because I don't know how to do it. Am I putting you on the spot?
Jeez, Chip, put me on the spot.
I know.
No worries. So if our audience and also our host here, if you go over to the right side of the screen, you'll see chat, a Q&A, and then there's 3 little like line graphs. That's where our poll is. I can also show it on stage for all of us as well, which is now listed here.
Oh, but how do you show the results, Gina?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll for now. And there are 5 results.
There we go. We have 51% in the meh, 36% say their CRM's a home run, and 12% in the insane asylum. So this
for one.
This is a session for you. So thank you for voting. That's super helpful. Hey, so those are the 7. We covered the 7. The last one, like I said, I think is one of my favorite. Just real-time data at a glance is so critical, and data hygiene, everything leads up to that. So what else comes to mind, Mallory or Ping, that you want to share in our next 5 remaining minutes?
Get the feedback from the reps, from the users, from the CMO, from the CEO. What do they want to see that they're not seeing? It's fluid. It doesn't have to be set and done and forget kind of thing. Key, getting that feedback.
I agree. Just sitting next to someone and watching how they work, that's not the easiest thing to do now that we're very remote, but get on a screen share, look at how your people run through the system, where they get stuck, where they're looking, where they're clicking. Really great way to try to incorporate better user experiences. And, I think that in operations, whether it's sales ops or marketing ops or rev ops, like we really are a very service oriented group. And we do want to make everyone's lives easier so we can sell more and make more money. So as much as we can give people, the benefit and the carrot of, hey, look at all of this data that you gave to me. I analyzed it. I figured out that if you do this, you have a 10 times better chance of winning the deal. This is from data that you gave to me. So it tells people why you're asking for the data. It gives them insights back out on the other side. I think that's the most important part of closing the loop, because they will not feel like it's such a time suck if they are a little bit more invested on, getting the insights back out. So making sure you're doing things with the data you collect, I think is probably, top of my list as well.
Yeah. Help me, help you.
I love that. Yeah. Close the loop, kind of involve them, bring them along for the ride, and prove that you actually use the data by showing it back to them. Those are phenomenal tips. Well, Mallory, Ping, it was so great having your expertise on this call today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody for joining us. Really appreciate it. And Gina, thanks for having us at Insightly on the Rev Genius webinar here. We loved it. So if you want to learn more about Insightly, we're at insightly.com, and we hope you check us out. Gina, any final words before we sign off, or am I signing off right by now by doing this?
We're out.
Sorry, guys. It takes a minute for me to pop up. So you got to just bear with me like 20 seconds. We did have one final thought and question from Brian Davison. He said, aside from reinforcing the why, the hygiene, thoroughness, timeliness, etc., is important or coming across as a heavy-handed taskmaster, what are some creative or tactical best practices you've seen effective in making the CRM a daily or hourly habit with teams? I think that's a great way to sign off by answering his question real quick.
Yeah, I think if you make it the thing that facilitates your one-on-one with your manager, that's really kind of the ultimate way to make sure that everything is in there. I don't know if that's as creative as maybe what you're looking for, but I think sometimes it's just good old-fashioned management, and you can do everything right in the CRM, and there's still going to be some squirrely guy who refuses to use it. He's probably been at the company for like 15 years, and he makes the most money out of everyone. I think we've all met him before.
He's the Post-it note guy that I talked about. Yeah,
exactly. He's the guy using the Post-its.
Yeah, he gets a free pass, but everyone else has to use the CRM.
Yeah, and it might be, I find it helpful to have reminders on the calendar. Right? Maybe it's the sales manager sending a reminder for a Friday, okay, not a Friday, Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. that says, hey, reminder to update your opportunities or your forecast so that we're ready to go the next day. Yeah. Very similar to what you said, Mallory.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you all. And thanks to everyone who joined us. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.